It's my nerd world, and the Acolyte arrives. Was it any good? I will share with you my thoughts this week on the show. As always, you can email talkshownerd@gmail.com, but let's not waste any time and get right to it.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
And welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, a Star Wars podcast. Thank you so much for checking out another episode this week. And listen, let's just get right into it. I'm not holding back. The Acolyte debuted the first 2 episodes, while many have seen 4. I've seen the first 2, and I'm not holding back on my opinion or spoilers.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
Not really a leak, but I didn't really have a spoiler sounder to play for you. 100 years before the rise of the Empire, it is a time of peace. The Jedi Order and the Galactic Republic have prospered for centuries without war. But in the dark corners of the galaxy, a powerful few learn to use the Force in secret. One of them, a lone assassin, risks discovery to seek revenge. This was the opening title card at the beginning of the Acolyte, using the same color palette as we would usually get at the beginning of a film of a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, also utilized at the beginning of Solo. I'll say up front, well, 2 things. One, the font they used for the opening crawl, title card, whatever you want to call it, at the beginning of Acolyte, was different than what they typically use for the A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. I do like the usage of this, if they're not going to use a crawl for the live action shows. I hope that we get some consistency. I think that's important in the Star Wars storytelling, that the presentation is consistent. I like what they did at the beginning of Ahsoka with the red, and that was more of a crawl, even though it didn't sort of back up into a starscape. In red, in a different font, it was a crawl that explained what was happening. I'd like to see some consistency, though. So we have this beginning of Acolyte matches Solo in that regard, and we'll see what happens moving forward when it comes to any more live-action shows. And I guess the next opportunity we'll have will be Skeleton Crew, hopefully later on this year. So that is the opening words to this show. One that I was incredibly excited about, as I've talked about, when it was first announced, I think it was 4 years ago now, became very trepidatious leading into the trailers, the promotion around it, even right up until finally watching the episode yesterday after my son got home from school. Some commentary coming from one of the stars of the show and the show's creator, causing all kinds of controversy online. I talked a bit about this last week. I loved the show. I really did. I'm excited to go sit down and watch these 2 episodes again. I'm hopeful that it maintains the consistency of these first 2 episodes. And from what we've heard of those who have seen the next 2 episodes, it sounds like the next 2 are even better. Apparently this 3rd episode is fantastic. Some of the criticisms that I heard going in of it being a bit of a slow burn, maybe not very compelling, the writing not being good, didn't have an issue with any of that. I truly loved these first 2 episodes. It's the first time since Ahsoka, and before that, The Mandalorian, where I immediately wanted to go and watch it again. That wasn't the case for Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I just finished the rewatch of. And by comparison, when we get into it, I mean, it's leaps and bounds better than Obi-Wan Kenobi. I didn't have a huge desire to go back and watch the Book of Boba Fett either. And to my own preferences of Star Wars, this is the type of storytelling that I like. You've got the Jedi, you've got lightsabers, you've got intrigue, there's mystery here, there's using of the Force, you've got spaceships. This, for me, is what sets apart stories like Andor and Book of Boba Fett. And to a lesser extent, well, we got some of that in the final season of The Mandalorian. But why I love Ahsoka so much. I actually think that the production on The Acolyte is maybe slightly a notch above Ahsoka. So let's just get into a few of the things that really stuck out to me. I'll talk about the production first. Based off of what we were seeing in the trailers, I was really worried this was going to feel too much like a television show again, and was pleasantly surprised as the first episode started that the production quality of the show was a lot grittier than what we saw in the trailers. They seemed to add a bit of a film grain to the actual picture, which I really appreciated. It leaned in a bit and reminded me of The Last Jedi to a certain extent. But the problem that I've had with the live-action production of the Star Wars shows has been they're just so crisp and clean. It feels like a set. It feels like television. And even there are some moments of Ahsoka, but there are some huge moments inside of Kenobi. I thought that Book of Boba Fett did pretty good on its production. The scale of some of the events in that show is what I had the bigger problem with, especially that last battle in the final episode. The Mandalorian and Andor certainly did it best, but the production around this was fantastic. I didn't see any sense of the volume. I got a sense of real constructed sets being on practical locations, whether they were or weren't. I do believe that there was some level of them shooting on actual locations. So from that standpoint, I was immediately locked in. These are sort of ancillary things. I really appreciated the ship design from the few vehicles that we saw. This is taking place post the High Republic era, of which I don't have any familiarity with, and I'll talk more about this in just a moment. About 100 years, between 90 and 100 years before The Phantom Menace. I really appreciated the ship design. Those vehicles, how they operated, immediately recognizable in the Star Wars universe, but also an era of which we're not familiar with. And while they're from the High Republic, so they kind of lean into a cleaner aesthetic that we're used to during the prequel era, there still was a design element where these ships looked like they were older Star Wars ships. So I was really appreciative of that. I love the fact, and this is what had me excited about the story to begin with. One, there was the element of the Sith and looking at this from the angle of the bad guys that compelled me. And we got a little bit of that in the story. I'll talk about that coming up. But I love the fact that this particular story, even though it's set long before the events that we've all become familiar with, was untethered from the previous storytelling. Now, being a novice to the High Republic era, not having read any of the books or the comics, much like a non-Rebel fan would have been watching Ahsoka, I can certainly see the moments in the show that probably meant more to the High Republic readers than it did for me, not being familiar with this portion of the storytelling. Some of the characters that are in the show also appeared in the High Republic stories, which took place long before the events of the Acolyte, but because of their species, they can live for a long time. The introduction and the closing shot of the Force-sensitive Wookiee at the end of the second episode, I'm sure was a moment that was impactful for High Republic fans, but maybe not so much for me. Even though it worked, I mean, it's a Force-sensitive Wookiee. I mean, how cool is that? That being said, none of that took me out of the show. I was immediately drawn into how these High Republic era Jedi are operating. I loved the relationship between the Jedi as they go on this adventure, essentially, to go search for Osha, who has been accused of the crime of killing a Jedi. How they operate together, how they figure things out. They offer advice to one another. How are they going to go investigate? It feels like almost like a cop drama. The Jedi Soul, I thought, was an interesting send-up on Qui-Gon Jinn. I love the fact in the show that we're seeing the Jedi use their strength and power. It seems like a lot of times when it comes to Star Wars storytelling that we've received, and I guess I kind of go to Ahsoka. It's like you see Sabine, she's training, and she hasn't quite figured it out yet, but she ends up, grasping the Force at the end of the episode. And we had a moment of that with Osha in the jail cell where she tries to appeal to the Force to force pull her little handheld pocket droid to her, and she's not able to do it. That was one moment where I was like hoping that she would pull it off so we wouldn't have this sort of mystery of when she's going to be able to tap into the Force again, but that's a minor criticism. Because we're surrounded by these Jedi that have no problems using their Force powers. The opening fight scene and the choreography of the fight scenes that we saw from both episodes was just fantastic. And I didn't think that I would be as interested in seeing these hand-to-hand sort of Jedi fu battles taking place, but the way that they were shot and how they were choreographed, I thought was really compelling. I'm hoping that we get the lightsaber action later on, because if they can duplicate their lightsaber battles in the same way they did, where you barely saw the lightsaber come into play until in that opening battle, where the first Jedi was killed in that bar when she ends up taking out the knives that she's using. Now, this, of course, is adding to the intrigue of all of this. What we think is a Sith. This would be the sort of the zipper-faced character in the helmet that we saw from the trailers, made an appearance at the end of Episode 1. He clearly is the master, or perhaps an apprentice himself, bringing about his own apprentice in this Acolyte, and he plans to supersede his master above him. We don't know this yet. But the commentary and the voiceover that he had of the Acolyte not using a weapon. I thought it was interesting that May, the Acolyte, both times in her encounters with the Jedi was going for the initial Jedi's lightsaber and also Soul's lightsaber, but she doesn't yet have one of her own. So all of this is to say, and this is more just a stream of consciousness of things from the show that I really, really got into. I really loved it. Way more than I expected. Now, I think we were sort of sold a mystery about who was killing the Jedi based off the trailers, but clearly we know who's killing the Jedi. That was exposed right away in the story. This mystery is really going to be about what happened with the twins of May and Osha. Why is it that they both thought the other was dead? And the bigger question is, why is May so bent on killing those 4 Jedi who were involved in whatever happened within that fire that ended up killing their family? My expectation is going to be, and this is what I'm preparing myself for, something similar to what we saw in V for Vendetta. If you never saw that movie, spoiler alert here, but you had a group of individuals that are being murdered. You kind of think that they're good, only to find out that they were actually bad, that they're the ones that ended up making this particular character V into the bad guy that he became. So there's almost no heroes in it. V takes on the character of a hero by the end, but it's really the anti-hero. I mean, he's going and murdering individuals. And of course, he feels justified in doing so because they were awful people. My expectation moving forward is that we're going to find out that the Jedi will be to blame in some way. And this is going to be a situation of no one's going to be fully wrong and no one's going to be fully right. I'm just accepting that that's the story that we are heading towards. With the one Jedi that May was unable to penetrate his force field that he had created around him in his little floating cone of silence. Pretty dark for this Jedi to go and take his own life using this Bunta spice poison, which has no relation to Bunta Eve, by the way. I did a little bit of research on that. They're spelled two different ways. That tells me that this individual, this Jedi, feels responsible in some way, in which case we're going to find out that somehow the Jedi are going to end up being responsible for the fire that ensued that brought about the death of her parents. We also know, based off of the trailers as well, and the teasers, that we will be getting flashbacks. The Indara, I think was her name, the Jedi that got killed at the very beginning of the first episode, along with the Jedi that was levitating and taking the vow of silence. We've seen them in trailers looking younger and alive, so we know that there's going to be further flashbacks, probably much in the same way that we've already seen Osha experience her own flashbacks with her younger self and her sister. Again, I'll just say I'm locked into the story. And I had taken and made a decision that, I'm going to ignore the commentary surrounding this. And there's a potential where, sort of the injection of, narratives that have ruined so many other products may make their way into this show. So far, I haven't seen any. I know there have been individuals complaining about the casting. I have no issue with the casting whatsoever. I think the acting was great. I think the writing was great. Both of these episodes, when they ended, I was like, no, I don't want it to end yet. I actually paused it at one point in time to see how much time we had left. It's Star Wars, but it's different Star Wars, and I'm okay with that. And again, I love the fact that we're untethered from other storytelling, so we don't have any really preconceived ideas apart from our knowledge of how the Sith are supposed to work, or this is even Sith. So these first two episodes, to me, were an absolute step in the right direction. I believe we're getting 9 episodes total. It's a moment where I'm like, I wish you released it all, but I'm actually glad they didn't, because I'm looking forward to speculate on the show moving forward. Now, with that, I do want to go to this article from Games Radar. And again, this is this is your warning, as there are going to be spoilers here, as I've already been talking about spoilers.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So, the big question right now, right, apart from the backstory of what happened to May and Osha and their true motivation here, right? It's this, who is this zipper-faced character in the helmet? It looks like a zipper, the big metal mouth on this mask. It's an awesome-looking mask. Don't misunderstand. So, I'm not familiar with the showrunner Leslie Headland's previous work in Russian Doll. Most people that are familiar with her are saying that the expectation moving forward is there's going to be some twists and turns. We already know who the Acolyte is and who's killing the Jedi. So the question is, okay, why? What motivated her? And who's the guy in the big black zipper face helmet? I'm not going down the road thinking this is going to be somebody familiar. I think we make a mistake. Well, I won't speak for anybody else. I'll just speak for me. I make the mistake of thinking there's going to be a bigger reveal and, we're going to find out that Palpatine can live a long time and it's going to be Palpatine, or it's going to be Darth Bane, or it's going to be the, Abeloth, right? Just characters that we've heard before that hardcore fans will be aware of, but maybe lost on a general audience. I think the reveal of the character is going to be a big deal, but not because it's going to be somebody that we've known from previous content. So, if you don't want to be ruined further, because this theory is really interesting, I would suggest that you skip ahead about 2 or 3 minutes until we get to the... or actually, no, just skip ahead 2 or 3 minutes, because I don't have any listener feedback this week. Or you can just end the show and go pick up my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. All right, you've had your warning. Star Wars fans, though, I think they already know the identity of the Acolyte's Sith Lord, thanks to one line of dialogue. So, again, this is why I want big screen Star Wars. This is why I like this type of storytelling, because now we're at that place again where we Star Wars fans can do what we do best and overanalyze everything and begin to speculate. And finally, we've got a show that, to me, lends itself to that kind of speculation, because I'm already invested in all of these characters after less than 2 hours worth of content. Before we go any further, again, as the article says, be warned, this may contain spoilers. Turn back now. So, the first 2 episodes of The Acolyte introduce us to May, a young Force user trained in the dark side following the death of her family. She's working with what we believe is a Sith Lord whose identity has not been revealed, but one clue might have given the game away. May is also helped by a shady man named Quamir. Now, Quamir is the individual who was inside of that business that helped her make the poison. Manny Jacinto's the actor who plays that particular character. Now, I liked the moments between those two because it was seeing how this bad guy is operating, or this bad gal, right? How May, a Sith acolyte potentially, is operating behind the scenes. It's one of the things when it comes to bad guys you just don't see, you just don't see a lot of. You need to spend time with them and talking with them and seeing how she's planning things out. So I dig that. Now, May to Quamir says one very intriguing line in the second episode. And this is what Quamir says. The Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace. He begins, which May finishes. Oh, he says, in the name of peace, and peace, he begins with May finishes saying, is a lie. She says, peace is a lie. I know. Some aspiring Sith Lords among you may recognize this quotes the first line of Sith code. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. I swear Quamir is going to end up being the Sith, wrote one individual on Reddit. He fought off May with ease, and they spoke about don't tell the master I did this, when it's probably him, so he already knows, they theorize. Sith during this time had to hide their true identity, so this is similar to the Darth Jar Jar theories about seeming incompetent individuals so no one suspects you. Of course, it's possible that Quamir has picked up the phrase from working closely with the Sith Lord, but that remains to be seen. At the moment, we have no further clues about the Sith's identity, so it seems to be the biggest hint yet. All right, so this is, even if it's not Quamir here, this is where I think the story is heading. Again, I don't think the reveal of this particular individual is going to be somebody that we've seen from previous content, right? It's not going to be this big, like I said, Darth Bane or somebody along those lines. It's going to be somebody that we've been introduced to in the story. Quamir is a very good candidate. But going back to what Leslie Headland, the writer and showrunner, had said previously about the show, she had mentioned and said several times that, she wanted to explore how it was that the Sith were able to go and infiltrate within the Jedi ranks. Like, how did they end up doing that by the time that we get into The Phantom Menace, right? With Palpatine, specifically. So, my theory on this is that maybe it's one of these Jedi that we've been introduced to so far. Now, Venestra, this would be the bald, green-headed, well, I guess green-skinned, right? Jedi at the beginning. She would be my prime suspect, apart from the fact that I know that she's famous from the High Republic novels from that have been released, so for her to go to the dark side seems odd. But if we're talking about how they're infiltrating within the Jedi ranks, then it would make sense to me that the individual who is training May would already be a Jedi, and this is their secondary persona. So it remains to be seen. The Quamir theory works good, and I think the fact that it seemed like he was picking up pretty quickly that wasn't May, that was May's sister Osha during that exchange, and I'm really interested to go back and do a rewatch on that to see for sure. It sounds like he's more on the up and up, so I would make him the leading candidate. But I also think there's a possibility that, again, now maybe they do go and use Vanestra, and she ends up being the bad guy in this, and we find out that she has her issues. That being said, the motivation of the Acolyte here being what happened to her family is going to be the core of this, and the reveal of whoever this character is, I think, will probably be somewhat secondary to that, to where it'll be a big deal, but not as big of a deal when we find out exactly what prompted her parents dying, lighting the fire, how are the Jedi involved. Again, really enjoyed these first 2 episodes. It got me excited for Star Wars in a way that I hadn't really been in a long time. I mean, and I'm actually having I had a stronger impact these first 2 episodes than I initially did Ahsoka. I love the Ahsoka show. Those first 2 episodes I felt took a while to burn. So hopefully this isn't an opposite where the Acolyte starts off strong and then goes downhill, whereas Ahsoka, I thought, started off a little slow and then really started to soar. But I'm just happy that we've got new Star Wars content, and I can sort of, for the moment, put any cautions that I had aside, and really look forward to next Wednesday when the 3rd episode drops. And between now and then, I can consume podcasts and find out what other people think. So I'd like to know what you thought. Drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Did it meet your expectations? Did you have any issues with it? Are you sold on the story so far and the characters? Again, really excited to go in and watch it, and I'd love to hear from you. talkshownerd@gmail.com. If you are new to the program, I'd love for you to check out my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK, if you enjoy reading. I wrote this series because of my love of space opera and science fiction. The first book is essentially a love letter to the genres that I love. Apocalyptic tales, those 90s sort of romances, setting up for a massive epic space opera. Katha's father died 1 year ago. Yesterday, he gave her the key to saving humanity. She just doesn't know it yet. That's the log line to book 1 in the series. With interstellar travel possible, pilots are the future, and since her aerospace engineer father's mysterious passing, Katha Morrow has relentlessly trained to be the best. But when an industrial accident sets off an apocalyptic chain of events, she'll need more than her skills to survive. Meanwhile, Taft Guardia picked the right day to upgrade his ship. When Katha arrived, needing his help investigating a cryptic message she suddenly received. As a tyrannical enemy emerges to ruthlessly exploit the disaster, Katha and Taft discover what may be the only chance of ending the conflict. On the run across the galaxy, Taft gathers a ragtag squadron to join the fight, while Katha must solve the mystery of what her father left behind if there's any hope of saving Earth's evacuees before it's too late. I hope you'll take a moment, treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction, written for adults, but great for ages 11 plus. Think Star Wars in terms of content. Pick up EMBARK Book 1 today. You can get it in ebook for only 99 cents. Free on Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic with some amazing technology filled with romance and action, EMBARK is perfect for you. Again, go to Amazon.com and search for Jon, Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK. Help support my nerd world and these podcasts. In the meantime, I'd love to hear from you. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and I will be back next week with my thoughts on Episode 3 of The Acolyte. Until then, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. God bless, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.